Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We hope you're keeping very, very safe and well. Thank you ever so much for joining us as we bring to you a bit of an off-the-script Last Word on Spurs on this one. There's obviously at the moment so much speculation in relation to the manager and in regards to the future of Tottenham. So for an hour and a bit, we're going to put all that on hold and we are going to analyse the recent finances from the club. We were lucky during as soon as those finances were released, I had the brilliant Kieran Maguire on Last Word on Spurs with myself and Lee that gave a real, I would say, piece-by-piece analysis of exactly where Spurs were after those financial results were released, the latest ones. And I'm absolutely delighted to say on this Last Word on Spurs, we're joined by Michael and Henry from the THST, Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, that are going to give us even more insight and analysis into the latest Spurs financial results. Now, I think the good thing is because we've had a good month or so to have had a good review and look at these, sometimes a lot more comes out than when you're having to just react to them instantly. And we're hoping during this Last One on Spurs, this offers a little bit of a breakaway in terms of what we're noticing and seeing at the moment with regards to waiting a decision on Tottenham, on Antonio Conte's future. But listen, if you're listening to us for the first time, you can find us on iTunes or on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on Twitter at Last Word on Spurs. We're on Facebook and Instagram too. I'm delighted to have back alongside me for this Last Word on Spurs. I'm not sure if he's fresh. We'll ask if he's fresh from the recent nature of Tottenham Hotspur. We've got the wonderful Lee McQueen. Macca, are you still drained? Are you still surviving? How are you, mate?
Surviving, mate. We've mentioned his name though in less than 2 minutes. Mr. Antonio Conte's name has come up, and it would be very difficult to do a show without talking about him, of course. But absolutely delighted to have Michael and Henry with us tonight. A fantastic insight. We're going to get a fantastic insight into the finances of Tottenham Hotspur Football Club and what that looks like, what it's been looking like, and what it looks like for the future as well. So really looking forward to this one. Yeah, I'm pretty fresh over it. I'm pretty fresh considering what's going on with the Spurs. And as Henry said in the green room, Spurs can't ruin our weekend this weekend. So happy days. Hopefully Kane goes and scores a hat-trick just to put the icing on the cake as well.
Yeah, we must actually say at the top of the show, obviously, a massive congratulations to Tottenham Hotspur's Harry Kane, one of our own, of course, becoming Spurs' greatest ever goal scorer this season. He has now done the same for England during this international break. And I say we keep on championing Harry. Let's hope he is still around to obviously break even further records in a Spurs shirt. And fingers crossed, that word trophies, let's hope he's around to see some trophies being lifted at the club. But joining us, two great guests to Last Word on Spurs. Obviously, we've got a very close relationship with the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, and delighted to be welcoming for their debut on Last Word on Spurs. We've got Michael and Henry, THST board members with us. Michael, I'll open the floor with you. Welcome to Last Word on Spurs. Pleased to have you on for your debut. How are you? And you might want to give us some background in terms of what you do there at the THST.
Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Macca. It's a privilege to be here. Very much looking forward to this. It can be a dry subject. I'm Michael Green. I have been on the board of the Supporters Trust for, I think, 6 or 7 years now, and I was asked to come on board by Kat and Martin, the previous co-chairs of the trust. Because of my background in working for a bank in the city, where I'm involved in credit risk analysis, essentially looking at potential clients of the bank and to determine whether they are sufficiently creditworthy in order to pay back the loans they're seeking from us. And that has obvious synergies with what's happened at Tottenham over the last 3 or 4 years with the debt that's been incurred to build the new stadium. I'm fortunate that Henry's a more recent joiner to the board. I'll let him introduce himself, but he also has a financial background, which has kind of helped share the load a little bit when it comes to looking at the finances of the club.
Henry, let's bring you in. Like I say, Michael, pleased to have you with us here. Henry, welcome to Last Word on Spurs. Welcome to making your debut. The best thing I can tell you is at least you're not on after a defeat. So I'll let you take the floor.
Thanks for having me, boys. Yeah, I've been following Last Word on Spurs for a number of years now. Actually, got me through lockdown. It's got me through the Mourinho reign. It's got me through the Nuno reign. Always came here for my therapy session, so it's quite nice to be able to give something back. So, thanks, boys. So I have I've been on the Supporters Trust for this is my second term, so second year. I originally got involved I've been going home and away for a number of years now. I've had a season ticket 20 years of my 28-year life. And I got involved really to offer my help on looking at the finances and trying to relay some of the key messaging to the fans. I think I was concerned about where the club was going with its strategy, and so I wanted to really have the opportunity to pick it apart and then come on podcasts, write reports, and assist Michael in getting that information out there.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, even in that opening entrance there, Henry, you were saying about the direction. I think that's something that as Spurs fans that we're already craving to have more clarity on. I think that's a situation that we find ourselves in right now where we record during an international break and we're not quite sure who is going to be in charge of Tottenham come on next Premier League game, of course, is on Everton on a Monday evening. It would feel bizarre had we not discussed this on the podcast. There's only really one place to start before we delve in to the finances and analyse them in real scrutiny. I'll start with you, Lee. Antonio Conte, as we record this on Sunday, the 26th of March, on time check it, it's 5:20. He is still the current head coach of Tottenham Hotspur. For how much longer? I don't know. But from what we understand, according to recent speculation, Spurs are still trying to work on a compensation package for Antonio and his background staff that would alleviate him, obviously, from having to continue to manage the club. Our understanding is at the moment that he has not returned to the UK. He's still in Italy. Ryan Mason, Christian Stellini have still been taking a number of the Spurs training sessions. I think they oversaw a friendly on Friday or Thursday of last week. So give me your thoughts, Lee, very quickly on Conte as to where we stand. And are you surprised, given what you said on Wednesday's show of Analysed Goal, that here we are, 3-4 days on, still no update on the manager, and still no clarity from Tottenham on what the future holds right now?
I'm really surprised, although maybe we shouldn't be surprised, but I am. The clarity is always quite, it's not very clear, is it? Let's be honest, it's quite clouded most of the time when we get messages out of Tottenham Hotspur. Some might say, well, hang on a minute, nothing's changed. He hasn't done anything. He didn't attack the board. He hasn't done anything different. He just called his players out. Lots of managers have done that in the past. He's in a scheduled break with in the international break back home in Italy. It's business as usual. That might be the message from the club, but it always comes back down to the fans, and the fans are the ones that suffer. We are seeing, hearing, watching story after story after story after story about this football club, and we still have no idea what's happening. We've got our managing director of football. We haven't heard from him. We haven't heard from the chairman. We haven't heard from our manager. It's just unbelievable. We've got Harry Kane breaking records for England on international duty. We've got Heung-min Son scoring free kicks on international duty. That we've got our players are performing. Yet we've got 4 or 5 players plus the academy players back at Hotspur Way, and no one's training them, as you said, other than Stellini and Ryan Mason, which has now been kind of like that, hasn't it, chaps and viewers and listeners, for what, good 3 months, really. That's set up. So it shouldn't surprise me, but I am surprised. We need some direction. We need some clarity. We need some information and understanding. It's quite interesting actually to have Henry and Michael with us on that finance side as well, because if it is compensation, if it is around finances, it'd be interesting to see how long this could actually drag out to. And I will say one thing. Most of the viewers and listeners know now that my father-in-law was a Chelsea season ticket holder. And he said to me, when Antonio Conte was appointed, he said, "You'll get fed up with him. Everyone will fall out with him. You watch, mark my words." I was like, no. I was with him for Sunday lunch today, and he said, "I don't like saying I told you so, but I told you so." He said, let me guess what he's done. And he just basically told me exactly what had happened at Tottenham, happened at Chelsea. And we all know what happened. He went and sued the club and all that sort of stuff. Same thing. Same thing's happening. It's a rinse and repeat cycle with Antonio as well. So hopefully we get some clarity, Rick, but let's not hold our breath. I'm sure at this rate, it'd be in the dugout for Everton.
Michael, maybe what I'll probably do is, just for your own sakes, is maybe I'll ask you as a fan rather than a board member your feelings around this situation with Antonio Conte. As we've said, still the current head coach of the football club, despite the fact that, as we understand it, it's fairly normal for him to still be in Italy as part of what would be an international break where he'd be taking time out of his family in his Turin home. Where do you read things at the Michael? Where do you read? Where do you read things at the moment, Michael? Given that football can change very, very quickly, and lots can change in terms of obviously the nature of this situation. And by the time the show goes out, maybe things have changed. But as we recall right now, he's still the current head coach of Spurs. How do you read it for you, Michael, at the moment?
I mean, I will answer this as a fan. I mean, it's any objective individual looking, objective football supporter looking at the situation, would swiftly come to the conclusion that it's an untenable position. I can't see how Conte can continue in the role for much longer. I mean, we don't have any privileged information compared to you, so our opinions are simply that. But I mean, the stories which seem to be coming out, you read the stories in the Athletic, for instance, about a majority of the squad now are no longer with him. Then they no longer want to work for him, and that's not a situation that can continue. But I think you also have to look at the consider the if you consider the last 3 or 4 years, it's this is not an isolated incident, is it? An isolated occurrence. We've had a series of difficult situations with our managers over a short period of time, having had a fairly long period of stability under Poch, and frankly, I look forward to a time of relative quiet and stability, and less of these psychodramas. And what that says to me is, whilst I want to get this situation solved as soon as possible, I also want to make sure actually that the next one is the right appointment too, and not appointing someone just because they are available at this moment in time. So I mean, I don't think it's quite as simple as saying Conte has to go right now. I think he does need to go as quickly as possible, but behind the scenes, and hopefully this is the reason why it's taking so long now, one of the reasons it's taking so long is because the club board are thinking carefully about who comes next.
Yeah, listen, I agree with a lot of what was said there. I think we all are, like I say, screaming out for clarity. And as you said that word there, screaming out for stability, craving stability right now, for sure. Henry, let's bring you in. I'm conscious that we're 12 and a half minutes in and we've not even delved into the finances yet, just the nature of what Tottenham Hotspur does to you as a football club. Where do you maybe stand again? I'll ask you that, Henry, just to avoid any political nonsense, of course, in terms of maybe as a fan rather than a board member. Your take on the situation with regards to Conte. Are you surprised, given what Southampton is now? That's a week ago now. Still, as we record here on the Sunday evening, so we're a week on, 8 days on. He still remains as the head coach of the football club. Are you surprised, Henry, for you?
I mean, again, as a fan, I think we are all craving that stability, and I agree with a lot of what Michael has said. I think on a wider point, though, that what was said last week in that interview, I don't think we could argue with the points Conte was trying to make there. And I think it really hit home with a lot of us as fans listening to him. But there's certain things that you can and you can't say, particularly in that role at certain moments. And as you said, the fact that it is news, the fact that we are still talking about it a week later, this has dragged on. I don't think we need another, protracted sort of 50-day search for another manager. I think we need a manager that's going to come in, offer stability, is going to play the right way, the Tottenham way, the DNA that we all love and talk about, because we've tried moving away from that, and to be frank, it hasn't worked, or it's worked to a certain point, but then it's never fully been perhaps been backed throughout the club. So you notice it going to games, whether it's Sheffield United away, whether it's you're at home, whether you're at a home game, there's infighting between the fans. There's constant discussion. We're not one. And I think one thing that we did have under, without going back to Pochettino all the time, because I think, we do need to find a new way forward. One thing that you can say is 95% of the fan base was together. We were going to the White Hart Lane together. You turn up knowing what you were going to get. You knew who the starting 11 was going to be. You knew that the team would be under the cosh for the first 20 minutes. And, you'd probably try and nick a goal. They'd come out and you'd try and get a second. And you go to any away ground in the country and you think you could get a result. And at the moment, you don't know what Tottenham's going to turn up. You don't know what team's going to turn up. and then you don't know what version of the manager is going to turn up before and after the game. So I think as a fan, I'd like to see a manager that plays on the front foot and is effective at doing that and has plan A, plan B. But most importantly, is having a manager that's going to unite us as a fan base and take us forward with some stability.
Spot on.
Yeah, I
Totally
wholeheartedly agree. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, and it's a difficult situation because, I mean, at the moment, because of the nature of the uncertainty, it's very hard to even sit here and just discuss what the future will be. You know, is there much of a purpose to do an hour on what Julian Nagelsmann will bring to Tottenham, and then suddenly they'll go and appoint Ryan Mason until the end of the season? You know, at the moment, you simply cannot predict what's to happen. But what I can assure you, as always, here on Last Word on Spurs, is that we'll bring you coverage of that all along the way, as we've always done. And I think we'll just see where this next week takes us. God help us as Tottenham fans. Right, listen, guys, we are going to delve in to the financial side as promised. So, sure, I will. I'll open up with you, Michael, and feel free if you want to bring, obviously, Henry into this first topic of discussion. So, Spurs saw a total revenue increase of 22.7% for the financial year, of course, of 2022. Now, after that was earning a 444 million in total, Spurs saw a jump of that of 82.1 million over a 12-month period after the previous financial year had totaled 361.9 million due to the COVID pandemic. Now, I think the most notable increase came in terms of match receipts, as their financial results for the year ending 2021 of June only brought in 1.9 million with all but 2 home games. Of course, we had the 2,000 fans that were there for Arsenal, and then the 10,000 fans that were there for that horrendous game against Aston Villa that I'm sure you guys won't need reminding, as obviously we played behind closed doors in that 2021 season. Many will probably say that was a delight. It was closed behind closed doors and fans didn't have to suffer it. But following, of course, the green light to operate to a full stadium capacity once again in 21-22, which in fact was the club's first full season at the stadium with a capacity crowd, the club saw match receipts rise to 104.2 million on the previous year to a total of 1.6.1 million. So I just maybe ask you, Michael, what your biggest takeaway was of the club's recent financial results, in your opinion, when they were finally released, as we know, later than scheduled.
Thank you, Ricky. It's important that you noted that this is the first set of financial statements that we've had which has a full year with full crowds in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. In previous years, you go back, the last 4 or 5 years, we've played, we're behind closed doors. We've played at various permutations of White Hart Lane, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and Wembley Stadium, which has made comparison from year to year quite difficult. This gives us now a starting point going forward, and you can see the messages come out clearer as a result. I think there's 3 key takeaways here. One of which is that the stadium has really turbocharged the performance of the company. The match receipts 106 million. I haven't done a comparison with other clubs, but I suspect that is in the top 2, possibly number 1 in terms of revenues per match day within the Premier League. And allied to that, I think is also the commercial income improved really quite strongly in the last year. And I think the credibility of that stadium gives in terms of attracting sponsors makes that a kind of symbiotic relationship. The one encourages and pushes the other. And that's really important, which we'll come on to later in terms of, where the money gets spent once it's been earned. The other thing to look at is the importance of UEFA money, and you mentioned that we only earned 10 million from our rather abortive participation in the Europa Conference League. Go back 4 years to the Champions League season when we obviously reached the final, and we earned 94 million then. So the Champions League makes a huge difference. And that we'll probably come back to that again later when we talk about the merits of prioritising a league game versus a cup game, but that's a big difference. Somewhere in between, if you look at June 2020 accounts, that was the last time we were in the Champions League, and we went out actually to Leipzig, I think it was, in exactly the same stage. So we earned 50 million in that year, 51 million. So we're already looking. We can reasonably expect that there's an extra 40 million in Tottenham's accounts, which have gone through Tottenham's accounts this year and has been available to spend. That makes a big difference, because that's essentially jam. There's no additional cost, or very little additional cost attached to that. So those will be my three takeaways. Importance of the stadium, which itself helps kickstart the commercial and the genuine importance of European football to us, to our revenue model.
Perfect. I'll let Lee take over from here, and I'm sure Henry will then bring in the fact he wants to talk anything about the nature of that question as well. Over to you, Macca.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, Michael, you just brought it up there before as well. One area that Tottenham did see decrease in the UEFA prize money, going from 23.6 million in 2021 to 10.2 million in 2022, because of, as you just said, from Europa Conference League as opposed to the Europa League. And it was COVID-enforced stage exit as well. We all know the story that happened in terms of huge impact on the club's earnings, as we was not involved in the knockout phase of the competition as well. And following a big increase in match receipts and commercial in 2022, the numbers continue to rise over the next 12 months. Tottenham certainly see a dramatic increase in the UEFA prize money from the 10.2 million that we saw in 2022, because we've now got through to the knockout stage of the Champions League, as you just referenced before as well, although we got clearly dumped by AC Milan. Henry, just if you could, do those results alone show how important it is for the current board that their sole target in finishing the top four to secure Champions League football is rather than kind of winning trophies? I know that's a bit of a loaded question, but Michael, you alluded to it there as well. It's quite interesting, isn't it? The fact is, for getting to the FA Cup final or whatever, you might get 2 million, but for qualifying for the Champions League, you might end up getting 40, 50, 60 million. It's chalk and cheese, isn't it, Henry?
Yeah, sorry, I was just on mute. Yeah, I mean, from when I was looking at these accounts, I think, as you know, as part of my job, I work in finance as a qualified accountant, and one of the things that we look at when we're assessing a business for performance is it's looking at the current year, yes, but it's also looking at perhaps where it's come from, particularly against its peers. And one of the things I did do when I read through the accounts was then go back and look at where we were in kind of the year 2000 when ENIC first took over, and then a few points between then and now to see how we've grown, but then also the importance of the Champions League money and the importance of the new stadium. So if you go back to the year 2000, we had revenue of 48 million. Now, wow. 22.1 million of that was gate receipts. So if you then fast forward that to 2017, which was the last year at White Hart Lane, we had revenue of 306 million and gate receipts made up 45.3 million. So purely in what that tells us is purely on the gate receipts at White Hart Lane between the year 2000 and the year 2017, we had doubled our gate receipt money. Now, a lot of that's inflation, ticket pricing going up, etc., and so on. And what flows through them from that is your commercial income going up. Because as people come to the stadium, inflation is increasing the price of shirts and beer and everything. But then what I wanted to do was look at how that compares to now. So as we sit today, our revenue was 443.4 million. Gate receipts were 106.1 million, as Michael said. So that means in the 22-year period, our gate receipts have gone from 22.1 million to 106.1. That, it's five times the amount we're earning.
That is impressive.
Now you look at that and you go, okay, inflation, ticket price rises. We acknowledge as a trust that we have one of the most expensive season ticket prices in Europe. We get that. But just from a financial point of view, that extra income is income that we can then put back into the club and use as part of our FFP calculations, and also to pump back into infrastructure. Now, if you look at, so that represents an 824% increase in revenue in the 22-year period. If we look at some of our peers at that time, so if you take Everton, the year 2000, they had 28 million of revenue. And now they've got 193.1 million as of the 2021 accounts. So that's 590%. So we've outperformed them. Take Aston Villa, 35.8 million to 163.7 million. That's 357%. So they're basically 3.5 times theirs. Man United have done 4 times. So Man United have done 4 times the amount of income that they were earning in the year 2000. We've done 8 times our amount of income. So the point is, we've had to work really hard to catch up to, if you take even Chelsea have done 3 times the amount. So we've closed the gap in that respect. But I think going back to your original question, which was about, why is it important to get Champions League football? For getting into the Champions League, before you kick a ball, you earn 15.6 million euros. That's before you even kick a ball, just for getting there. And if you compare that with, and that ignores broadcasting, if you compare that with the Carabao Cup, if you were going to win the Carabao Cup, you get £100,000 as a team. And the FA Cup's £2 million. So, it's not for us to judge strategy or, where we place importance, but, the numbers, we're numbers people, the numbers speak to where it's important for the club to do well, I guess. Getting into the Champions League can really prop up our revenue streams and what the club are trying to do with the commercial deals. We've seen that we've had the F1 confirmed, and I think Land Rover are also another one. They're trying to create revenue streams so that if we miss out on the Champions League, we've got a 365 day a year product that can earn income and almost make up the slack. If you look at a Chelsea, for example, they only make income on the days they've got a hotel on the side, but outside of that, they only make income on the days that the football's on. And so if they miss out on Champions League, it's a bigger hit. So I think it is important that we get Champions League football. But from a fan's perspective, when I got home at 4 a.m. from Sheffield United and we hadn't even had a shot on goal, and you think who we've been out to in the last 6 years, we've not been getting knocked out the FA Cup by Man City or Chelsea. It's been very much we've been going to lower league opposition sides, putting out a B team and then getting beat. So I think that's where the fans want to see. I want to see Harry Kane playing in front of Sheffield United, personally. So
can I just, Emily, just interact with you now on that point? I think again, you're absolutely bang on, and I use this word. I used it last show, in the last show that we did. I think the board off field have been absolutely magnificent for this football club. The numbers that you've just quoted there, the stats, the percentage increases, just unreal, like unrivaled. In fact, absolutely amazing. But what's the point? What is the point to us fans if we don't see? You talk about. And I completely get it with my business hat on. I completely get it. Let's look at different revenue streams just in case. If we get from, like we did a couple of seasons ago, don't get Champions League and we get Europa Conference League, our drop-offs, as Michael just said, and you've mentioned as well, Henry, it's going to be vast. So let's look at different revenue streams to keep us to where we need to be. For what, though? Because for what? For the footballing side or for the business side? To keep the numbers at this level, yes, get all the commercial deals in, but are we seeing the progress that we want to see on the pitch? Because if we are, then we wouldn't need to play a B team or C team against Sheffield United. Against, by the way, a completely changed Sheffield United. 8 changes they had. I was there, like you, Henry, in the stands, freezing cold, getting home late, early hours in the morning, watching utter dross, and it cannot continue in that way. Just see where I'm coming from, and that's the biggest disconnect. I'll find it very difficult to find anybody, even the real staunch, levy out, enic out people to say that they haven't done a good job with the finance of this and the business side of this club. But because my understanding, I'm not like you guys in terms of the finance, but my understanding is it's amazing, and some of the stats you just said. But it's the footballing side, Henry, isn't it? That the two don't marry up. So yes, get extra revenue streams in just in case we get out of Champions League. For what? To continue to pay the wages of these superstar players, to go and buy more superstar players. But what's it for? Because if it's just to keep the books in check, then the fans are still the ones that don't see any progress.
I totally agree on that.
I think it's.
Go for it,
I think it is really important to split. You've got to split the two from, and I think we're going to come on to it, but you've got to look at the commercial side and say the last 20 years it has been a commercial success, and we have now got the platform with that stadium, with the way the debt is financed, to be able to succeed in the future, and we've got the infrastructure in place. That we're now at the top table of English football, and when in the year 2000 we definitely were not. And I think where the frustration comes in, I guess on a personal level, is that we'd already made from the years 2000 to 2010 when we got into the Champions League, we'd already got ourselves to the brink of the top table by the way we were playing football. We were all there that night when Peter Crouch stuck it in at Man City. And we all went mad in that away end, and we thought the Champions League dream is here. And I think where I, on a personal level, I've had frustration is over the last 10 years, the footballing decisions that have been made, particularly on the transfer front, haven't allowed us to kick on and get that. And get that Premier League trophy, albeit we've been so close, and get the Champions League trophy, albeit we've been so close. And so at some point, the success of the commercial business, particularly with the new FFP rules coming in, where 70% of your players' wages, transfers, acceptance payments can only be 70% of your revenue. It's really important that we've got that bigger revenue to be able to use that against. But as you say, Lee, it doesn't help when you're stuck at Sheffield United. And you've not had a shot for 60 minutes.
No, I've got to say, I always say this when we do these shows. It's really, really fascinating stuff where you break away from discussing post-match analysis on Tottenham and have a chance to really delve into other areas of the club. And the finances are always one where I know for many out there like me that aren't really massive financial experts, that still do take a real interest in terms of when they hear different people come on and discuss them, just the nature of what goes on behind the football club and how things are structured. And as Macca said there, is there a purpose if you're going to look to do what we've done to then not want to kick on and push on? And that's before we even discussed the transfers. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our midway break of this show. Delighted to be joined alongside me by the wonderful Lee McQueen, co-host for Last Word on Spurs. Of course, we're joined by Michael Green and Henry from the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, board members from there, giving us their insight into Spurs' finances from, of course, those latest results. Michael, I'm actually going to steer the show back over to you. So in regards to those recent results that came out, we saw TV and media revenue also down in the previous 12 months after earning 1,442 million in 2022 compared to 184.4 million in 2021. This, of course, was due to a number of games and related TV and media revenues from 2020 being played out and accounted for in 2021. There was one area that Tottenham did see a notable increase of 20.7%, and that was their commercial revenues, as their 2022 total of 183.5 million was up by 31.5 million compared to 152 million in 2021. Now, a massive and major factor in the revenues was due to new sponsors, club stores being open, the growth of the e-commerce market, and the start of new major events being hosted in that stadium, is what we've seen. The club's operating expenses before football trading did increase to 18.7% to 403.4 million. And then when you compare that to 2021, it was 339.8 million due to increased first team costs and the return to full match day operations. And the profit from operations before depreciation, amortization, player trading, interest and taxation increased by 15.7% to 112.3 million from 97.1 million. So I think the question that many might ask is, Michael, is that I think we've seen now for 3 years in a row, there has been significant losses in that period. I suppose the question I want to ask you is, how massively is that concerning for you when you sit on that board? And how massively concerning should that be for the owners of the club, ENIC, when they really strip that back and have to look at those figures?
I think, I mean, to state the obvious, it would be better if they were, if there weren't losses being recorded and it was a positive net result at the end. But you know, one of the things we have to do in our positions is to dig below the numbers, and the profit and loss account is very good in kind of looking at the revenues and then the costs which get applied to that. But unfortunately, the accounting rules then say that you have to start subtracting items which actually don't have a cash basis behind them. Same with Tottenham. So at the operating level, we're doing reasonably well. But because of the new stadium, for instance, we now are obliged to charge, I think it's 45, maybe 50 million pounds each year in depreciation against the stadium. Now that's not a cash cost. There's no money goes out of the club as a result of that. But it, you know, that alone, I think that amount alone probably tips the P&L into or close to. It'd be almost break even without that. What you should look at in the financial statements is actually the cash flow statement, because that actually looks at the cash, what cash has went into the club during that 12-month period and what cash went out. And the cash flow statement has three principal components. The first of all is operational cash flow. So that is basically how much cash does the company, the club generate purely based on operations. You know, the cost of the income we've already talked about, the match receipts and the commercial revenues and the UEFA prize money, less the costs involved in running that. So the mainly staff costs in the stadium, but there'll also be things like the I'd imagine energy costs have gone up significantly recently, like they have for all of us. And we had a positive result for that in 2022 of 101 million pounds. And that compared with a loss, an operational loss of 9.5 million in the COVID effective 2021. We then look at what, you know, that's basically the pot of money that the club has generated, and then we then need to look to see where that money goes, and it has principally been spent on player trading. So your costs of buying players, and not just players this year, but it's actually the instalments that you've paid for transfers from previous years, netted off against the money that you get in. And then there's an element of capex costs. There is still some ongoing capex related to the stadium. There's always going to be maintenance capex which needs to be paid. And the club actually this year, the club spent a decent chunk of money, I think 10 million from the top of my head, on expanding the training facilities to provide better facilities both for the women's team and the academy. And funnily enough, that those investments that the club made during the year, they totaled 100 million. So we're almost in balance. So in essentially, you could almost say on a cash basis, this is a break-even business. However, after that, we have one or two more costs, and the principal one after that is the cost of servicing the debt. So it's the cost, and we'll come on to that, I think, a little bit later. And that essentially took off an extra 22 million. So we're kind of getting into deficit now, and that's one of the reasons why it was necessary for ENIC to make that equity investment, because they needed cash to secure the Richarlison transfer. That's why it came in when it did, because they needed that cash injection to fund that going forward before they got other money coming in. So net loss, to go back to your original question, net loss is not brilliant, but not a disaster, and can be explained. And we can probably expect to see them for a few years more until the revenues increase to such an extent that it makes good that difference of the depreciation on the stadium.
Yeah.
And I suppose just a quick follow on, if I may, on that, Michael. In the coming years, I suppose that's part of that key strategy, isn't it? If we can get into Champions League, and keep doing 40, 50, 60 millions in Champions League, that reduces that time that we're going to get into shortens that deficit, right? Ultimately, and then essentially being in a positive, in a quicker way, the more money that we're earning. Correct?
That's correct. I mean, I guess the key commercial question that you might ask of the club at the moment is, how much further can it grow on kind of an organic basis? I mean, because there will be an increase in revenues this year because of the new international broadcast rights. My calculation is that's worth approximately 15 million, I think, extra to the club. But the stadium is where it is, and you're not going to, you can't simply build another 20,000 seats to increase the match day receipts. So we're kind of at the level we can get to. So where else is the scope? And it's on the commercial side. Now you've seen the two most successful clubs in England from a commercial perspective are Manchester United and Liverpool, and they are some distance ahead of everyone else. Questions about Manchester City and how commercial some of their sponsorships are, so we'll leave them out of it. So there is still the possibility of that gap, but of course, I mean, being objective, Liverpool and Manchester United probably have a bigger brand name than Tottenham does, as something you can sell to potential sponsors. The one area where we do have scope to significantly increase commercial revenues is, of course, stadium naming rights. That could be worth quite a decent amount of money in terms of adding to the annual revenues.
Yeah, no, so it's a fantastic point. Henry, if I can come over to you, Tottenham parted with 209 million in wages to their playing staff, while Daniel Levy earned 3.3 million, which is the highest director pay in the English top flight. But I would just caveat that by saying, with numbers like what we've just talked about from the commercial side and the business side, some might say that Daniel Levy not only paid 3.3 million, he earned the right to give himself that. If you take it away from the playing side, but nonetheless, Spurs spent 160 million across both transfer windows on the acquisition of 7 players, including Cristiano Romero, Golini, Brian Hill, Papa Matar, and Emerson Royale. They all joined in the summer, and then Bentancur joined in January with a fee. Although Dejan Kulusevski did join, but he's essentially on loan. They were both in January 2022, so I don't think Kulusevski's numbers will actually show up in the until it becomes a permanent transfer. And they currently owe clubs over 250 million in outstanding instalments on transfer fees. And they may end up paying add-ons worth 64 million, depending on where Spurs finish or what the players that they've actually bought actually end up achieving. Hopefully it's loads of trophies, I suppose. But Spurs could also earn 61 million from add-ons, including in their contracts of sold players. And we've got a net transfer spend during that period of about 67 million, plus a possible 17 million of add-ons. Henry, just coming over to you, if I may, what have you personally made of Spurs' decisions in the transfer market, given the fact that, well, we spoke off air, didn't we, to be fair, but given the fact that, the recruitment of the football club has been under scrutiny, certainly over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna look at the commercial side and say it's been, it has been a remarkable success, I think it's only fair that we sort of balance and temper that with the thing that we ultimately go to the stadium for on a Saturday, which is the football side. And I think it's a very complex situation to break down at Tottenham over the last last 10 years with transfer dealings, really, because we have spent money, and we've had so-called checkbook managers in the last sort of 2 or 3 hires, and they've all had money to spend. So if you look at, to give background on this, so there's a few people that I work with, and we've got a spreadsheet of running transfer costs. and net spend player sales, where we go on to transfer marks every time there's a deal and estimate what the amortization looks like, and you can categorize it by manager. And so just kind of running through that, going back to sort of the 2014 era, which was Pochettino's first year. So in the years, and I think it's really important to look at almost pre-stadium and post-stadium. So 2014 to 2019 under Pochettino, we had a gross spend of circa 277 million, and a net spend of 26.6 million. So, gross spend of 277, net of 26.6. So what that is showing is we're spending money, but we're getting money back on player sales. So we recovered 246 million on player sales.
Yeah,
and then after Pochettino. After we'd moved into the new stadium, Pochettino got a further 129 million, player sales of 50 million, and net spend of 80 million. Now, if we then move on to Jose's reign, Jose had a gross spend of nearly 100 million and a net spend of 86 million. Nuno and Conte 110 million with a net spend of 92 million. And Conte got 152 million with a net spend of 116 million. Now, on average, since we've moved into the new stadium, we've spent we've spent 93 million pound a year. In the years from 2014 to 2019, we spent on average, just over 5 million a year net spend. So what that tells me is there's two things. Firstly, in the period before we moved into the new stadium, we were spending less, but we were recovering more, so our net spend was lower. And since we've moved into the new stadium, we've spent more, but we've recovered less. Now, the reason that we've recovered less is, there's a number of things, such as the difficulty in offloading underperforming players into European markets, which you've seen the financial issues that the Milan clubs have had, Juventus have run into recently, and the other reason that we can't get the money for the players is actually they're not good enough, and it's a result of poor footballing decisions. I think the era that haunts all of us was the year Poch wasn't backed, which was 2018-2019, when we didn't sign anyone. But the problem began before that, because in the 2016-2017 season, we signed, I'll list some names off, Moussa Sissoko, Vincent Janssen, Wanyama, and Kudu, and Paul Lopez. Now, that window cost us £71 million. And you'd argue that Moussa, for 30, and Victor, so 41 million of that, got into our first team, fantastic. But another 30 million of it, I mean, I can't remember a goal any of them scored for us, or they're not regular first team players. So 30 million of that 71 million in 2016-2017 wasted. 2017 to 2018, this is the window of the spending that year. We spent 111 million. So Lucas Moura, 25 million. Okay, Ajax, fantastic, but has he ever cemented his place as a first teamer? Davinson Sanchez, 38 million. Serge Aurier, 22.5 million. Llorente, 13.5 million. Foyth, 11.7 million. So in that year, we had 110 million spent. Now, arguably, Serge played, so 22, and but outside of that, they're not first team players. So it wasn't just the 2018-2019 period when Poch wasn't back. It's the fact that in the 2 years previous, we'd basically bought Sissoko and Wanyama, and arguably Serge, who made it to our first team. So then, of all of that in the 2 years prior, we spent 181 million, and sorry, 1 second. Arguably 63 million of it was first team players. The rest, but the problem with that is that because of we spoke about it earlier, but the amortization of these players. So you amortize the cost over the contract. So that goes into our FFP calculation. So if we buy Nkudu on a 5-year deal for 20 million quid, we have to recognise 5 million a year in our in a 5-year deal, it'd be 4 million quid in our FFP calculations. Now, what I would say is that since then, since Pochettino left, since the 2018-2019 season when we didn't spend any money, we then spent 129 million on the following: Giovanni Lo Celso, Jack Clark, Ryan Sessegnon, Tanguy Ndombele. So you've got 100. So in the previous years, you've got 120 million that was just wasted basically, and then we've got another 120 million now. Okay, Ryan Sessegnon is in the first. He has been in the first team, but that compounded the issue of the 3 years prior, and then
totally.
And then the year after, we have Doherty, Højbjerg, Rodon, Reguilon, Bergwijn, and Vinny who come in for 100 million. Again, Højbjerg, okay,
none of them there,
but none of them. And then Paratici joins, and you got Romero for 42 million, Brian Hill, Emerson Royale, Sarr, Bentancur, Kulu, Richarlison, Bazuma, Spence, and Udogie. So the point is that we've spent money near enough the whole way through, apart from 2018-19. But the point is that, and you've seen it with Everton recently, between I think 2016 and 2020, Everton had a net spend of £275 million. And your response to that will be on what? What have they bought? Because they're now looking at financial fair play. They haven't got the income to be able to offset the losses on those players. And, there's now points deductions, etc. and so on. Thankfully, we have got the income to be able to offset the, some of the mistakes that we've made in the market. The fact that we are in the Champions League, it means that we've got a larger income to be able to offset some of those mistakes. But it has hamstrung us. And it's taken, we've still got some work to do, but it's taken 2 years to get the squad back to a place where, okay, you can sort of see a spine in the future with, new wing backs coming in next season. We've got Romero, looks brilliant. The Kane situation needs sorting, fine. Richarlison looks like, under the right manager, under the right conditions, he could thrive. So, the foundation's there, but the mistakes that were made in, I'd say, between 2016 and 2020 have really hamstrung us financially and what we can do in terms of the market. But since Paratici's joined, we've definitely improved.
That's it. Just hearing them. I mean, I've been, and everyone knows, viewers and listeners, I've been a staunch bring Poch back scenario. But actually, when you started listing off a lot of them signings that maybe under Poch's tenure, and I know 518 days that we didn't make a signing under him. I did a big piece a couple of weeks back on the director of football scenario. And actually, listing some of them transfers that recruiting that you've just talked about there, Henry, it's quite shocking, actually. To be fair, that again, we're always 1 or 2 steps behind. Obviously, one of our own, Anthony Costa, calls us, too short FC sometimes, doesn't he, Rick? Because we're always 2 players short, 1 player short, whatever it might be. But that's maybe the reasons that you're just talking about. The reasons because of them decisions that we're making in the transfer market. I mean, how can we actually have over £200 million worth of talent or transfer fees out on loan? Now, how can we have all of them signings, bar Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, under Jose Mourinho, not even playing for the football club anymore? Jose Mourinho was only here 18 months ago, 2 years ago. They don't even play for the football club. It is abysmal, to be fair, but interesting points that you make, Henry, to be fair, on them comparisons, because I quite like to see some comparisons. Maybe this is for another show when you guys come back on, but some comparisons with the likes of Liverpool, as an example, where they had a bit of a sliding doors moment, didn't they, Rick? When Dejan Lovren got turned inside out by Kane, we battered them 4-1, sliding doors moment. They went out and spent, and they took a 22-point swing from the previous season to the season next. And then you've got Arsenal as well. I hate to give them credit again, but fair play to them. They've taken a 25, 26-point swing from whatever they was last season to even to this point. So it can be done with the right decisions, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, Henry, you listed off those windows under some of those managers. just wow, some of the things that we've made as a football club. And, for all the great things that the board have done in terms of delivering the stadium, the training ground. I mean, there's no doubt about it that we seem to have definitely lost our way in the market. I mean, many would argue that Daniel's recognised that, hence the reason behind Paratici coming in the door, him taking more of a back seat in terms of, football transfer related matters. But then what you do find is that at times Daniel has taken the steering wheel and ultimately made some of those decisions himself in terms of obviously, bringing Conte to the club, being pivotal behind some of the signings, a la Jed Spence in the summer, that we know Daniel played a massive role in. So you still feel that whilst we have handed the reins over to Paratici, there is still elements that Daniel is controlling. And I just wonder, as long as that goes on, are you really, really going to fix the problem? And ultimately, I just don't know if we will, I'll be honest with you. Interestingly, coming down to you, Michael, the club defended their position in February when questioned by the THST, obviously yourselves, over their transfer spending, which, to be fair, has seen them invest more than around 500 million since April 2019 into the first team. And they've spent a further 47 million in the January window. Of course, all on that Pedro Porro signing, Arnaut Danjuma coming in on a season-long loan, although Arnaut will probably argue, has it really been a loan? Has it really worked for him? He's not really seen many minutes at all. I think, again, when you temper that with Chelsea's spending, which did send alarm bells across Europe, there is now, we see a greater reliance on financial fair play, as Everton are finding out, of course, as well in the recent few days. Daniel Levy did actually admit mistakes have been made in the recent years regarding player recruitment. And as I said, which the club has tried, in order, you would say, to somehow rectify with the arrival of Fabio Paratici, who himself now is facing his own battle for his job. And we await to see what happens with him. Obviously, his situation at the moment is that he is banned in Italy from making any kind of football transfers. We await to find out whether that ban will be extended across Europe and worldwide. And if so, how does that really, really, work for him at the football club? Does his role become untenable? I mean, I suppose, Michael, what I'm trying to get to at these points I read out here is, are you massively concerned about the future, what holds in the market for Spurs, given the nature of some of the things I've mentioned there with Daniel, with Fabio, and really not knowing at the moment what's to come on this, Michael?
I think that's a difficult question. I mean, to some extent, it's out of our hands. It's out of the club's hands. I mean, the authorities will decide whatever they decide with Paratici, and I'm not sure if I was in Daniel Levy's shoes, I'd be wanting to preempt any decision until that decision is taken. What I think you're seeing here is, I mean, speaking personally here, I think there has been an improvement, certainly, in the identification of players since Paratici's come in. I don't think anyone could doubt that could describe Bentancur and Kulusevski, for instance, as anything other than fairly successful transfers. And there does appear to be a bit more focus. And I think it's certainly one of the criticisms that we had of the club board is that Henry described the quite staggering growth actually of the club as a business over the last 20 years, but for quite a long time the management had stayed exactly the same. It was concentrated on the same three individuals. And so actually, I welcome the fact that they were bringing some additional expertise onto the board, both with Mr. Paratici, but also Todd Klein, who's coming to drive the commercial operations. So, overall, I would say that was a positive. We mentioned earlier, I think, at the beginning of the program about the need for stability, and clearly the situation around Paratici doesn't contribute to that. But ultimately, as much as we'd like to believe otherwise, all of us are replaceable in our jobs. And I would like to think that if the worst happened, then there would be the club has already started thinking about who replacements for that, who might be suitable replacements for that role, rather than going down the route of once again changing the management structure, because I'm not sure that would be the course of action that I'd like to take.
I've got to say, guys,
That's
it has been a really, really fascinating show. I know we've got a final couple of questions to ask you before we bring it to a close. And I've got to say, look, for me, as I mentioned throughout the show, I'm no financial expert, but when we do sit here, dive into the finance that you guys have clearly given us some massive information on, Henry as well, with the managers that we've spent money on, I think this will really give fans food for thought in terms of what they want next, which I think is right to maybe ask that question of what we want next as we end the show. But before I do, Macca, I'll hand over to you and let you ask the final couple of questions that we've got to come.
Yeah, please. I mean, I'll just come back over to you, Henry, if I can. It feels like that you've had Michael's questions and I've had Henry's questions tonight. It's just how it's worked out. But having borrowed to fund the construction of a £1 billion stadium, which, by the way, again, absolutely magnificent, without a doubt, in my opinion, one of the best stadiums, if not the best football stadium in the world. It's absolutely amazing. The Lily Whites have total debt of 853 million or 626 million net of cash. Levy was reportedly holding out for naming rights deal worth around 25 million per annum for 15 years back before COVID struck. They would have sealed a world record 375 million, if they'd have managed to get a suitor, but that is yet to happen. Are you concerned, Henry, as a trust by the level of debt sitting with the club and also the lack of success as it seems? Because I would kind of temper that with, I think the club and in particular Todd Klein and the commercial side have done an amazing job. But it does feel like at the moment there isn't a suitable suitor, if I can say that, for the naming rights stadium. So are you concerned as a trust with the level of debt and the fact that we can't find or seemingly can't find naming rights at the moment, Henry?
I think the debt number is a big one. It's in the hundreds of millions, as you'd expect, with a stadium of that size and the value of it. And I guess so. From an accounting point of view, we touched on the amortization that we have to put through the income account every year for the stadium, and so the debt will sit on our balance sheet, which to show how that's financed. So there's a cost of the debt and there's a cost of the stadium, which go through our profit and loss. They get, part of those get taken out when they do the financial fair play calculations. So, if anybody's trying to work it back, just strip out those two costs because it is on infrastructure. So they're ignored. So even though we did make a loss, you have those back. It's not actually a loss, it's an operational profit. So for FFP, for the future, we should be okay. So going back to debt, if you want, on a personal level, if you've got a house, the most effective thing to do is to get a mortgage on it, and that's what the club have essentially done with the stadium. They've done it using some long-term bonds, which go well out into 2050 in some cases, and at a rate of 2% every year. Now, so that means that they've got to pay 2% on their interest to the people that have lent us the money through the bond agreements. And if you now went and got that same deal, so if Chelsea were going to go try and get that same deal, they'd be paying a lot higher because you'd have seen the interest rates have gone up to 4 or 5% now. So whether it's luck or judgment, we've got very cheap debt going out well into the future, which won't need to be reassessed for many years. At the time it gets reassessed, the stadium will, through inflation, the value of the stadium will undoubtedly have gone up. And a lot of the impact of inflation over that period as well will mean that some of that debt will come down when it gets to refinancing time. Do I think it's important to have a naming right? Yeah, of course. I mean, I think if COVID hadn't have happened, I think the market would have been a lot more receptive. Even just from my work in the property sector, and during COVID, everybody was in their houses. Nobody was going to football matches. Nobody was going, going out really. So it was a tough market. Nobody had any money, and that included businesses. So nobody had any money to offer really for the naming rights. And I think if the club did receive offers, they were probably below what they felt it was worth. And it doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. If you think you've got a one-off deal which is going to extend for 10, 15 years, you want to do the best by the club to get the right amount of money. Now, obviously, that's if you're then waiting 3 or 4 years, you've got to then make up the cash flows, if that makes sense, because that's 3 or 4 years less income that you've got. But so it's a real balancing act. I think the naming rights should be a phenomenal opportunity for any large business out there that would, wanted to get on the map with a Big Six football club. There's no other football club in the Big Six that can offer that at the moment. So, if COVID hadn't have happened, I think it would be a very different conversation. I think we'd all be a bit scratching our heads as to why there isn't a naming rights deal. But because COVID did happen, and it did set the club back a couple of years just in terms of cash flows and the knock-on impact that had on other businesses, it wasn't the right time to be doing a multi-million-pound, multi-year deal for these naming rights. Now, I think right that the question now comes up of, is now the right time to be doing that deal? And that's part of the club's strategy, I guess, for them to come up with, determine. I'm sure they have conversations about it, but
for sure,
COVID definitely put it back.
I think it's quite interesting as well. I mean, we obviously just obviously from our side, we don't know this at all, but I wonder if the club's been quite clever as well, because Michael, you mentioned earlier about that commercial aspect with Manchester United and Liverpool and the juggernauts that them two clubs are in terms of commercial. Everybody knows them, and you would probably say the reason why that is because they win everything. They've won Champions Leagues and they've won trebles and all the likes of. The most decorated English clubs in English football, right? For sure. But equally as well, having the stadium named the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and having all the events there, having all of the NFL there, having all the F1 track that you just talked about, and it being called the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, that's also getting the Tottenham Hotspur name out in the world, right? So ultimately, it might be a timing thing, but it also might be a situation where the club are being slightly clever in the sense of saying, look, let's not press the button on naming rights right now, because ultimately what we're doing is we're getting our Tottenham Hotspur brand out there, which inevitably is going to help us cut a better commercial deal when the timing is right. I mean, I don't know, look, I'm speculating on that, but that seems to me to make a little bit, well, certainly commercial sense from where I come from. So, Michael, just to finish up with you, and then Rick, obviously you're going to some footballing matters that we can all talk about as fans. But Spurs confirmed back in May last year that they've received a capital injection that you mentioned earlier, Michael, of 150 million from majority shareholders from an Inc. to support the club's growth, both on and off the pitch. An Inc. owned by 85-year-old Joe Lewis, who is worth 4.3 billion, according to the latest Forbes figures. So it's only through Forbes. Agreed a capital increase of up to 150 million in the summer with Spurs via the issue of a convertible A shares and accompanying warrants. The club stated the investment represents permanent capital with no ongoing interest cost to the club, which is important. Going back to Henry, your point about low interest costs. So we're paying down the debt, or in this case, we're not having to pay any interest on that, which may be drawn in tranches until the end of the year. 50 million of that 150 million, as we understand, you might be able to put us right, is still yet to be drawn. And we understand that it should have been drawn before December 31st, 2022. So does Daniel Levy now have to decide whether to use the remaining 50 or to increase Inc.'s ownership of the club, that sort of thing? Kind of, how does that work, Michael, in your kind of understanding on equity raise? Because ultimately the current level is 85.6%, and it should increase to around 87.5% if they use the entire 150 million. Is that kind of how it works?
Yes, but there's some interesting small print in the finance. To come to the overall amount, the agreement was in place until the end of last year, and 100 of that 150 million total amount has been drawn. The club didn't get wholly 100 million. There was I think a couple of million taken off just as the cost of administering this scheme, but that left 50 million undrawn. In theory, I think probably legally that 50 million is no longer there, but the club advised me, because we've asked questions as part of this financial analysis process that we go through. The club have advised that it is they have essentially to practical effect extended that, and that 50 million will be made available if independent director on the board makes a request to ENIC. The small print, the amounts that you suggested were right in terms of the amounts raised. The number of shares which were issued, that can vary because it's based on a formula looking at market valuations, and unsurprisingly, the club are reluctant to make that available to us. But the warrants are what is the interesting thing, and the warrants are essentially a separate financing instrument, which in this particular case essentially give the holders of the warrants the ability to convert them into yet further shares. And the warrants at the moment, up until the end of June this year, are converted again based on a formula which is not made available. After that, from June 2023, for a period of 5 years, I think it is, maybe 3 years, the warrants can be converted for 5% of the fully diluted club. And thereafter, that 5% figure goes up by 1.5% per year. So it could, for a maximum of 10 years. So the maximum possible that those warrants could be converted to is 20% of the diluted shares. Now this, and a full disclosure here, full transparency, I am a small shareholder in the club, very small shareholder. But that gave me pause for thought, because one, my shareholding, my very small shareholding, is being diluted, and that two of the other 15% of the equity which isn't held by ENIC. And I was also concerned that that would cause the ENIC ownership to rise above 90%. And that is significant because, as I understand it, under UK securities law, as soon as a majority shareholder is 90%, he or she is required to buy out the minority shareholders, which would see all of those ordinary shareholders like me who are fans. There's no financial interest particularly that we have. Certainly for me, it was more an emotional thing. We would no longer be allowed to have that small ownership going forward.
Interesting.
Fortunately, I have done the math since then, and I don't think they are going to breach that 90%, but they're going to be very close, as you say, about 87.5%, maybe slightly more. So it is something to watch, but the immediate my immediate concern has been allayed.
Okay, that's interesting, really interesting stuff. And I mean, we always get amazing comments when we do shows like this around the finance stuff. And Michael Henry, you've given us fascinating light into some depth around the club finances and what that looks like. And I just want to really close the show, if I may. I'll probably stick with you on this, Michael, and then we'll go over to Henry. It's just to take your trust hat off, and just as a fan, because we're all fans at the end of the day. What is it that you want to see primarily over the next, it's not just over the next part of the season, is it? It's literally over the next kind of, couple of seasons, 2-3 years or so. Michael, starting with you, where do you want to see the club as the direction of the club on the footballing side, essentially, as a fan?
I think I want to see a club and a team which seems to be pulling all in the same direction, to a strategy which we can all buy into and can understand, and to, as a result, to have, frankly, more games at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, or away from the stadium, where you come out of that stadium with a buzz and
a smile, and you're happy.
Yeah, there's been too few of those lately, and even when we've won, I think like Chelsea 2-0. I mean, it wasn't the same as when we beat them 5-1 in the League Cup, for instance, 20 years ago. Totally. It was.
Is it Michael? Is that an expectation?
We've been missing.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think that's an expectation thing? Do you think our expectations have got so much higher now? Or, Conte, to be fair, called us out a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? As fans, saying impatience and you need to be patient. Is it because we've been so patient that we're just craving now for some sort of success and some sort of trophy? And obviously that lot down the road looked like they were about to win the league as well. And been so far behind us season after season, and then all of a sudden they're going to go and do it. It's like they're all compounding factors for you, Michael.
I think it's inevitable that expectations change when you have a couple of seasons where you have the best team for at least 50 years or 60 years, and you come so close to winning the league and the Champions League. It's inevitable that expectations will change. But I don't entirely buy the Conte argument. Frankly, if we had been playing football which was good to watch, and winning as many as we were losing, I think we'd be happier than we are now with this, frankly, very drab style of football, which simply doesn't entertain. And I think yes, football's about winning, but it's also about entertainment, and there's been precious little of that, I think, at our stadium for a few months now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, spot on. And Henry, just coming over to you, just coming over to you, Henry. Same question. Like how over the next kind of coming weeks and months, if it turns into season, what do you want to see from this fine football club? Oh, you're on mute, buddy. You're on mute. Yeah, that's it. You're off.
We haven't got him. We've still got Henry on mute.
Oh, yeah.
We might need Henry to unmute himself if he can.
Yeah.
We've got you, Henry. Go for it.
That's it. We got you. Sorry,
buddy. I think I'm like many other fans. I think I'm ready to fall in love all over again. I felt so connected in that 2016-2019 period, accumulating in the Champions League final. I felt part of something bigger than just going to the football and watching a football team play. I felt part of something, part of a. I don't want necessarily another project manager, but I think a middle ground of just going to the football, going to the games and enjoying us, put teams under pressure first 10-15 minutes. And I think as part of that, Michael touched on it. We need to have a strategy. We need to work out what the identity of our football club, what we want it to be, and then it's about implementing that to the one player that the manager doesn't want. Now, sad you say Arsenal have the massive jump in points have had year on year. As much as we don't like them, you have to respect and commend what Arteta has done there, and the fact that he's been allowed to take losses on players that he hasn't wanted, that aren't part of his project, aren't part of his plan. I think our club, more than any other, probably in the top six in the last 5 or 6 years, we've stuck with players for too long.
Spot on.
And we've seen mistakes. Same again. We're waiting for the next one. When's the next one? When's the next one? And it would be nice to draw a line in the sand and go, right, we've got a good set of financial results. We've grown enormously over the last 20 years. And now it's time to kick on. We've got the full stadium, week in, week out. We've been in the Champions League again. And now it's about saying, right, let's continue the good work that Paratici started on the incomings. That's got to continue because we need to build a team for the future. The next step, we have to find a way of offloading some of these players that are weighing us down. And that's players that are out on loan, but it's also players in the current squad that simply aren't good enough. They're not good enough to beat Sheffield United reserves. So they're not good enough to take us to the Champions League and beyond. And I think it's to fall in love all over again with a team that, play away in a style that's associated with this great club.
I love it, Henry. It only feels right, Macca. I'll close it with you. On the back of what you've heard tonight from the financial side of the football club, I don't know if that changes your mood and mindset in terms of who you maybe want next in the dugout, in regards to what you maybe want next for the future of the club. But Lee, I'm going to close it with you, mate, on the basis of what we've heard tonight. Anything change in your mind in terms of what you want for the club in the future?
Well, I know you will do this at the end of the show, but I just want to thank Michael and Henry for giving up their time and sharing their amazing insights for us. It's been absolutely brilliant. These shows to me are just they're so different to what we normally do, and I absolutely love it for that. It hasn't changed my mind. I'm Poch all in, and all these people that are on Julian Nagelsmann and everyone else. It's we're like magpies, a nice shiny new object. Oh yeah, this one, he's good. He's Maurizio Pochettino gave us the front foot football, the academy, the youth, the outstanding memories that we've got, and we didn't even win anything. And if he was back during them 518 days, this would have been a very different path that we've gone down. So for me, I want to get back to that. I want to, like Michael said, like Henry said, I want to go to the game. I go every week in, week out, up and down. You know, like I go to away games, go to the home games. And contrary to what people do believe, like, yes, I pay for all my tickets. I'm not bankrolled by the football club or some nonsense that these people spout on social media. And the fact of the matter is, I'm just a passionate fan. I just want to be able to come home and enjoy my weekends with my family and my friends, go for a few beers with Spurs, and we don't deserve anything. We don't deserve anything because you have to work hard to get to where you need to be. But we've made some horrific decisions, as we've talked about tonight, throughout the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. Maybe some will say over 20 years. But when you separate out off the back of the show, absolutely magnificent business, magnificent off the pitch. Like you can hardly fault them. I'm sure there is some faults out there, but on the pitch, you've got to get it right, guys. This next decision, don't let it rumble on. It's 8 days since Conte had his rant, and we still don't know anything. So for me, it's pull your finger out on the football side for me.
Fantastic. Guys, I've got to say a massive thank you, Lee, as always, to Henry, to Michael. Thanks so much for your time. It only feels right, guys, just to ask you very quickly, for those that have listened and watched this episode of Last Word on Spurs, how those that want to be a member of the trust, do you just want to very quickly, either Henry or Michael, just explain how they can, individuals, viewers and listeners, become a member of the trust? Whoever wants to take that one?
It's pretty simple. Go to THSTofficial.com and you can sign up there. Alternatively, you can get in touch with any of the board members. Our email address is a kind of first name last name at THSTofficial.com, and we can also progress that via email if that's easier.
And also, I would add to that, if you want to get involved or know more about the work we're doing, just get in touch with one of us at info@thstofficial.com. And we have 12 board members at the moment, but who are re-elected every year. So, if you think you could come in and want to get involved with it, then the next round of elections would be next January, February time. But, if you think you could make an impact or have something to offer, then please get in touch and we can point you in the right direction.
Guys, I've got to say, it's been a massive pleasure. You are going to hear some background noise. I've got my little one in here with me now. Thank you so much from the wonderful Lee McQueen, from the brilliant Henry and Michael Green from the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust. We've been the Last Word on Spurs. We're going to be back with you very, very soon. As always, please keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on you Spurs.